What's going on, guys? It's Barry here with the Scryguystv, and just to let you know, this is our first gameplay video. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we do play with proxies. Most of the proxies that we do play with, we actually do own, except for a time twister. I don't own a time twister. I don't think I'll ever own a time twister. But won't stop me from playing it. But I hope you guys enjoy our very first video, and we look forward to sort of playing around with what kind of style of video we want to bring you guys. So look forward to that, and yep, enjoy the gameplay.
Plus, we'll be playing Lara Croft, looking to loot everyone's graveyards for legendary artifacts and legendary lands to put a discovery count on them to hopefully play later. Also, take advantage of her raid ability to generate treasures to get his goat online or mindslaver other people at the right time. Corey is playing Breena to get players to start attacking each other with the promise of card draw, meanwhile growing his weenie army into gym rats. He has a backup plan of playing attrition cards like Kumbal to punish players for playing non-creature spells to hopefully get the table at a low life total to swing in with his army of gym rats. Curtis is playing Pantlaza, taking advantage of ramp cards like 3 visits and human creatures that reduce the cost of dinosaurs to hopefully take advantage of Pantlaza's discover ability to play out a bunch of bombs like Galta Stampede to send all of his opponents into the Jurassic Age. I am playing partners Tana and Ardenn, taking advantage of Ardenn's free equip ability to suit up Tana in the finest garments to create an army of saplings to run over the table, and if that doesn't get through, running a Godo Helm line to finish the game. Quest decides to start out the game. He draws, plays a Misty Rainforest, cracking it, taking 1 damage, and going for a Ketria Triome. I go to my turn, draw a card, and play Jetmir Garden and pass after that, getting the tap land out of the way. Corey goes, draws his card, and he plays a Swamp, debating what to do. He goes for it and taps out for a Dark Ritual, using the 3 mana from the Dark Ritual, playing Phyrexian Arena. What a great start for Corey. Passes, Curtis plays Jungle Shrine to get that tap land out of the way and passes to Quest. Quest plays a Mountain, going into a Farseek and then getting a Breeding Pool tap. I go to my turn, draw a card, play Cliff Top Retreats. After that, I play Jeweled Lotus, sacking the Jeweled Lotus and tapping 1 mana to play my commander Tana the Bloodsour to hopefully get some saplings out of the way. Corey goes to his turn, takes the damage from Phyrexian Arena and draws an extra card. Goes, plays a Scrubland, but with nothing to play, passes the turn to Curtis. Curtis untaps, draws, and plays his special version of Jetmir's Garden and passes to Quest. Quest goes to untap. He plays a Rejuvenating Springs, taps 3, and plays Lara Croft. After that, passing the turn to me, I untap, drop a Savannah, tapping 3 mana to cast my commander, but with no artifacts or equipment out to go. I go to combat, swing 2 at Curtis to make 2 saplings. Corey goes to his turn, takes the damage from Phyrexian Arena, draws his 2 cards, puts a Plains down, and goes to play Preacher of the Schism and passes after that. Curtis goes to draw, drops a Carplusian Forest, and then taps 3 to play Rampaging or Raging Raptors. Passes after that, goes to Quest, untaps, plays a Forest, and drops a Goblin Engineer, pitching a Chimil the Inner Sun into the bin. Goes to taps for 3 and casts Zorn to hopefully take advantage of Lara Croft's raid ability to create treasures. Swings in at Curtis for 3 damage, putting the Chimil into the discovery zone and creating 2 treasures from Zorn. I go to untap, draw my card, play a Sacred Foundry, untap, taking 2 damage, and then playing Reaver Cleaver, move into combat, equip into Tana, swinging out at Curtis with Tana and 2 saplings. Curtis blocks 1 sapling and goes to ramp, get his lands. I create some treasures and pass after that to Corey. Corey goes, takes 1 damage from Phyrexian Arena and draws another card. He plays up Plains And after debating what to do, taps 3 mana to play out his commander, Breena. Going into combat, he swings out a quest, creating a vampire, drawing from the Breena trigger, and putting the 2 counters onto Breena, passing to Curtis. After that, he untaps, draws a card, plays a plains for his land for turn, and then going to tap 3 mana, play Elemental Bond to set up for future turns, and passes to Quest after that. Quest goes to untap, draws a card. He plays a Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, giving everybody forests, swinging at me for 1 because I'm at the highest love total to get the Breena trigger going. Raid trigger abilities, and he creates 2 more treasures and plays Faldorn, Dread of the Wolf Herald. After that, using mana from the treasures and tapping for Chimil, the Inner Sun, all spells he controls can't be countered, and he has the Discovery channel ability, and he also creates 2 wolves, going to his end step, playing into the Discovery, casting Big Score, discarding Mithril Coat, and creating 3 treasures, and drawing to 2 cards. And he passes after that turn. I go to untap, draw my card, playing a plains, tapping 4 mana to cast a Toski, Bearer of Secrets. I go to attacks, going 4 Saprolings at Curtis and 3 at Corey. Curtis blocks 1 Saproling, triggering Enrage, going to get a land. And Curtis takes 3 damage from Tana, letting me create more saplings and more treasures. Because 4 creatures dealt damage this turn, Toski's ability triggers, and I draw 4 cards. I tap some mana, sack some treasures to play Cutzil, Malamute Explorer. Using another treasure, casting Skull Clamp, and clamping 1 of the tap saprolings that attack this turn to draw 2 more cards. And discarding Canopy Vista to the bin, passing the turn to Corey. Corey untaps, draws his card, takes a damage from Phyrexian Arena, and then draws. And he goes straight to attacks, attacking me with Preacher, attacking Quest with Breena, and attacking Curtis with a Vampire. We go to blocks. I block with Toski, and Curtis blocks with Raptors, getting another land. Going to main phase 2, he taps 3 mana, and Toxic deluges the table for paying 5 life into it, clearing the room for him. He goes to discard. He discards Timna and Gonti, passing the turn to Curtis. He goes to untap, draw, plays out a mountain, taps for 5 to play Pantlaza, trigger on the stack with the Discovery. He goes for that first and casts Dinosaur Egg from the Discovery, and after that draws a card from the Elemental Bond. And then he pays 3 mana and plays Sunfurl Imitator, and he gets to draw 1 card from the Elemental Bond because Sunfurl is 3 power. Quest goes to his turn, untaps, draws a card, plays a Flooded Strand, cracking the Flooded Strand, taking 1 damage, playing an island. He goes to tap for 5 to recast Lara Croft, taps it 2 and sacks a treasure to play the One Ring. Now he has protection until his next turn. He taps it, puts a burden counter, and draws a card. And he sacks 1 more treasure to play the Millennium Calendar. After that, he goes to his end step to do Discovery Channel, and he plays Ethereum Sculptor after that. I go to my turn, untap, draw a card, play Command Tower. Wanting to rebuild right here, I go pay 5 mana to recast Ardenn. Moving to my combat step, I equip Ardenn with every equipment I have on the field, and I pass the turn to Corey after that. At the end step, Corey Enlightened Tutors, looking for probably the best enchantment in white, Smothering Tithe. Going to his turn, untaps, takes the damage from Phyrexian to draw, and then he draws again. Going straight into playing the Smothering Tithe, generating him so much throughout this game. And then he swings at me with the Preacher of the Schism, generating his 1/1 lifelink vampire, drawing a card from Breena. And he puts the 2 counters onto the lifelink vampire. Curtis goes to his turn, untaps, taps 2 mana for Nature's Lore, grabbing a Savannah, goes to tap to 6 mana, and plays Italy. He draws a card from Elemental Bond. And then he goes into his Discover ability from Pantlaza, going into a Rampant Growth, getting another Forest. He goes into combat, and he attacks me with Sunfurl Imitator that turns into an Italy. So the Italy trigger goes off. Everybody reveals the top of their decks. And wow, what a spread. What a spread for him. He reveals a Farseek, which he casts for a Stomping Ground. A Drawn and Limbala, which he plays. A Colossus Hammer for me. And he gets a Nakal Pakal, first among equals. He gets a Stomping Ground out. And then the trigger from the Elemental Bond from the Tana coming onto the battlefield. I've already taken the damage. We move into discards. And he discards Registrar Alpha with Akal Pakal's ability. And he also discards a Marauding Raptors. And he passes after that to Quest turn. Quest untaps. Quest triggers his Millennium Calendar, putting 8 counters onto it. And he loses 1 life from the burden counter from the One Ring and draws. After that, he taps the One Ring, draws 2 more cards, puts 2 more burden counters on the One Ring. He plays a Sulphur Falls. And he attacks me with the Ethereum Sculptor for 1 damage. After that, he gets a raid trigger from the attack, creating a treasure. Quest goes to tap for 1 blue for Emery, revealing a Dockside, Frantic Surge, Yavimaya, and a Bow of Nylea it to the bin. And he moves to his end step, triggering Chamil and revealing cards until he reveals a Professional Facebreaker. He passes to me. I go to untap, draw my card, play an Ancient Tomb. Using the Ancient Tomb, taking 2 damage to cast a Arcane Signet. After that, I play Sword of Feast and Famine. And I'll tap for 6 mana to recast my commander, Tana the Blood Tower. Moving into combat, I equip Feast and Famine to Ardenn and swing 6 at Corey. Corey takes the 6. I create 6 treasures, untap my lands, and Corey goes to discard a Kumbal. Moving into my second main phase, I'll tap 3 to cast Krenko 10th Street Kingpin. Corey, at the end of my turn, he paths to exile the Atali. Having 2 Atalis on board was just too dangerous for him. After that, Curtis gets a Plains from the path to exile, and Corey goes to untap. Corey takes a life from Phyrexian, draws his 2 cards, plays a Swamp. Corey goes to tap 5 mana to play Damning Verdict to destroy all creatures with no counters on them. Basically the whole board, but I pay 2 and cast Heroic Intervention, saving my board. After that, Corey pays 4 mana to play Elendra the Dusk Rose. He moves to combat, attacks Breena to Curtis, and Preacher to Quest, creating a 1/1 from the Preacher trigger. And before the Breena triggers on the stack, Curtis taps for 1 mana and plays Path to Exile on Elendra, not letting it get counters onto it. So Corey moves and goes into the Breena trigger, puts his counters on Breena and the other vampire, and draws his 2 cards. And after that, Corey goes to end step and passes the turn to Curtis. Curtis untaps, draws a card, taps for 8 mana to recast Pantlaza. This time he draws the card first from the triggers from Elemental Bond. Doesn't want to look at it. And then he goes to the Discover trigger for Pantlaza, going into a Beast Within. Using the Beast Within, he decides to go for the Smothering Tithe to slow Corey down from all his production. So Pantlaza entering the battlefield triggers Dinosaur Egg Evolve ability. After that, he pays 2 mana into Otek Huntmaster for 2. Passes the turn to Quest, but before end step, he Cyclonic Rifts. Curtis goes to discard Elemental Bond and Otepic Huntmaster and Dinosaur Egg. Quest moves to his turn, goes to untap, takes 2 damage from the One Ring, and puts 9 counters onto his Millennium Calendar. Goes to his draw, and he plays Displacer Dinosaur. After that, he taps the One Ring, puts 3 burning counters on it, and draws 3 cards. After drawing those cards, he plays a Mountain, and using his treasure and 2, he plays Reaver Cleaver that actually comes down as a 7/7 because of the Displacer. He goes to his Discover, and he gets a Wheel of Misfortune, opting to put it into his hand rather than casting it. I untap, draw a card, I play Windswept Heath, cracking it, taking 1 damage, getting a Forest onto the field. I take 2 damage from the Ancient Tomb and a white to play Ardenn. And I tap 6, playing Godo. I search up for my really awesome Helm of the Host, putting it onto the battlefield from the Godo trigger, and I try to move into my combat step. But before combat, Curtis taps 3 mana, generous gifts the Helm of the Host, giving me a 3/3 Elefante. I then pass the turn. Corey goes to untap. He draws, plays a isolated chapel, and he plays Breena. And after that, he plays Preacher of the Schism once again. Taps for 1 mana to Swords to Plowshare the Displacer Dinosaur, stopping Quest from creating more 7/7s, and passes the turn to Curtis. He untaps, plays a Gaia's Cradle after drawing his card, and he goes to tap out for 8. Trying to make sure he taps all the right mana for all this. After tapping the mana, he plays Galta, Stampede Tyrant, vomiting his whole hand onto the board. He gets a Pantlaza, he gets a Bronzebeak, Xenagos, a Apex Altasaur, a Ripjaw Raptor, and a Regal Behemoth, giving him the Monarch. After that, he goes to discover from the Pantlaza trigger, using Apex Altasaur and getting a Zatalpa Primal Dawn. He has Apex fight Breena. He also has Apex fight Reaver Cleaver. And at the end, he has it fight the Preacher of the Schism, killing the Apex Altasaur after all that damage is done. And then he uses the Bronzebeak to exile the One Ring and my Godo. After that, he moves to combat, puts the Xenagos trigger onto the Galta, making it a 24/24. But Corey pays 2 mana, passes out Archivist Ogma, and has it block the Galta, leaving him at 1. He passes the turn to Quest. And during Quest's turn, he puts all of his Millennium calendar counters onto it. Quest plays Ottawar, Soaring Sun for his turn, and he plays Mindslaver and automatically targets Curtis. And he passes the turn, going to his end step and going into a Chaos War, targeting Bronzebeak. So he gets the One Ring back, and I get my Godo back for getting my Godo trigger, unfortunately. But on the Chaos Warp, Curtis reveals a Return of the Wild Speaker. I go to my turn, draw. I pay 4 mana for Tana. I pay 1 mana for Colossal's Hammer. And then I go to pay 4 mana for Reaver Cleaver, or 3 mana for Reaver Cleaver. And I tap 2 for Arcane Signet. And with that, I tap Arcane Signet for a Skull Clamp. I move into combat and I put everything onto my Elefante, swinging at Curtis. For a 15/14, he double blocks with Zatalpa and Xenagos, getting 3 damage in. So before we move on, we didn't notice it during the time of filming, but Curtis forgets to take the 3 damage from the attack that I did. It sort of affects the end of the game, but if played differently, it wouldn't have really. So I just wanted to point that out. So after that, I draw 2 cards from the Elephant dying. And I crack 2 treasures. And I cast Nature's Lore, just grabbing a Taiga. I pass the turn after that. Corey draws and untaps. He casts Savine's Reclamation, getting Kumbal, and casts Court of Grace to grab the crown for me. He passes the turn to Curtis, who's actually being played by Quest. He casts Arcane Signet, takes 2 damage from the Kumbal. He moves to combat, puts the trigger on Galta, making it a 24/24, casting Return of the Wild Speaker, drawing 24 cards. Curtis takes 2 damage from that. Quest moves to attack, sends the Ripjaw Raptor to Corey, and Quest swinging Galta and Pantlaza to me. Me figuring there's nothing else for me to do, I just take the damage and die. quest, goes to main phase 2. He plays Soul Ring, plays Rishkar's Expertise, Mana Crypt. All this is also taking 2 damage off of Curtis. Curtis plays 3 visits, fails to find. He Boros charms Curtis, making him take 6 damage. He plays Growing Rats of Itlomok with the 1 white. He plays Swords of Plowshare to get rid of the Kumbal. So the game was going pretty late, and so there was a lot of mistakes that happened during this turn, but it still would have ended the same. The one thing though is that the Swords of Plowshare would have fizzled, because as he was casting it, he would have taken the 2 damage and no longer have been there. But it doesn't change the result of the game, so I decided to keep it in. So Quest goes to his turn, untaps, takes damage from his 1 ring, and goes to draw his cards. He plays a Dragon Rage's Channeler into a Brutaclad. Going into combat, he makes a mirror, swings it at Corey for 2 damage, goes to his end step, has his Chamil the Ender Sun trigger go off, and goes for a Storm the Vault. After that, Quest passes the turn to Corey. He untaps Court triggers, creating him a 1/1 Spirit at his upkeep, and he goes to draw. Realizing that there's not much else he can do to stop this onslaught from Quest, decides to concede the game.
Editing Barry here. I did not realize how hard it was to narrate these games. Shout out to MTG Musa, who's been doing it for years, because that was hard. I've retook it so much that my voice is pretty hoarse. So I think going forward, I might just have the audio from the gameplay just play out, and hopefully that'll be good. But I hope you guys enjoyed the first video. We're gonna try to get better, or at least I'm gonna try to get better about editing these videos and making sure like no misplays happen again. But yeah, hope you guys like the video. Like, comment, and subscribe.